Hey there, welcome back to Mike's EV Garage. So I just recently had the opportunity to attend the Tesla Owner Club of Michigan annual summer meetup in Muskegon, Michigan. I've been to it before. If you haven't seen that video, you can click up here. I'll put a link there and in the description down below. It is an awesome meetup and is the biggest event in Michigan, I believe, and definitely for this year. It was really awesome. I'm going to have several videos that I will be sharing with you from that event. But I thought I'd start with one that actually was me speaking. It was part of a team with Karl from Zero E Michigan. I'll link to his YouTube channel down below. And just talking about Michigan EV perspectives and having the conversation about electric vehicles and Teslas specifically. And I kind of covered how do you have that conversation. So I won't have an outro. We'll just give you the speaking as it was. It was recorded on a cell phone from a little further away, but I think with the PA system, you'll be able to hear everything okay. And I'd love your thoughts after you watch it. Please drop your comments down below. If you have any suggestions or thoughts on it, I'd like to read them. So without further ado, let's see what I had to say.
Thank you, Karl. I think it's only proper in Michigan with a greeting that you got, right, in Michigan you got to point where you're from. So when you're meeting people you haven't met today, seeing them for the first time, which I think is what's really cool about these kind of events, it's people you might know from online or something like that, get to meet them in person, feel free to use your hand to show them where in Michigan you live. And it works for the UP too, remember you just turned it sideways. Okay, so thank you, Karl. Thank you for everybody who had a part in putting this together. I will admit it wasn't me, but I've been involved with similar things in the past, and it is a monumental task. Thank you to all those who did that. Karl talked a lot about kind of the what's happened over the years, and the where, which that was an awesome lead-in with the story of Navaway, of these are kind of the opportunities we have. I thought maybe one little thing I can add is kind of the how. How do we have these conversations? It may seem like a weird topic to be talking about how to have a conversation with somebody, but as you pointed out, this is kind of on us. We're kind of enthusiasts about EVs, about Teslas, and we can see it all the time, either in conversations we're having or in conversations we see online. Those are some of the favorites, right? There are effective ways to have a conversation and not effective ways to have a conversation. And so I'm curious, real quick, has anybody who can hear this ever heard of the book Difficult Conversations? Anyone? Oh, yes! All right, we got some hands. If you have heard of it, nothing I'm going to say is new. If you've read it. If you have not, I highly recommend reading it. And it's not just for difficult conversations. It is really about how do you just have effective conversations? How do you have a good, non-confrontational conversation with somebody, especially if you don't agree about it? I will admit it is don't let the shortness of the book fool you. It is action-packed, and I have read it now 5 or 6 times. I try to read it every few years. But just a few things to take from today. When you're having these conversations is, I think it's very common to us humans that our initial reaction to most things is an emotional reaction. And I would encourage you to not react emotionally, but one thing I was taught by a mentor of mine is anytime you feel like you're going to have emotional reaction, that's your key to get curious and to ask questions and to find out more about what led to the comment somebody made or the statement they were talking about. And I'm going to give an example, real life example. And my wife actually gave me a lot more examples yesterday, and a lot of them were better than my own, but they're not in my notes. So if I remember hers, I'll make sure to mention those as well. We were at church one night getting ready to leave, and it was an absolute downpour. I mean, torrential downpour. And I was standing there, as we often do, as we're contemplating, am I actually going to walk out in this? And so a friend next to me was like, oh, holy cow. I think this was within the first probably year of getting our Model 3 back in 2020, our first Tesla, and said, are you going to be able to drive home? And my initial response was one of curiosity. I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, you have an electric car. Are you going to be able to drive home? And he was completely serious. And now I think it's easy enough emotionally to react and say, that's a stupid question. Where did that come from? And I'm sure if you read enough posts online, that is potentially one of the nicer responses you will see. But I got curious and I got thinking about it and seeking to understand and ask questions and be like, well, why do you feel that way? I mean, what makes you think that? And he's like, Well, I mean, we all kind of learned it in elementary school. Electricity and water don't mix. Like one of the things you're told as a kid is, man, if you're drying your hair, you better not drop the hair dryer into the bathtub. Okay? And then it clicked for me. I'm like, okay, well, that's just the frame of reference that he has, what he taught. He didn't. So it was a good opportunity to talk about it. And we had actually added full self-driving at that time. So not only did it give us an opportunity to talk about, okay, they're sealed. Think of this more like your cell phone, and although, I mean, these are only so good if they're buried in water, but you know what I mean. Think of it more like your cell phone than you do like the hair dryer falling in, it's sealed, all that. So we had the good informational conversation, but then we got to have a little fun, because back then at least, our Model 3 was able to do smart summon, okay? And so a lot of people had already left because they were braver and didn't care about getting wet. And so I did that, and I brought it up to the door in front of us without actually getting outside. And of course, so now that conversation changes. Well, can you even drive home to now, holy cow, this thing's cool. Not only now did he understand that, oh yeah, I mean, they're fine, they can drive, they test against all this stuff, it's a sealed battery pack, all this kind of stuff. But now he can actually see, well, wait a second, holy cow, this thing's driving itself. So that was one example. So asking questions like, you know, what makes you say that, or what makes you think that way? Another powerful way to talk about something is to just say, oh yeah, based on that, I mean, I can understand why you would feel that way, and then continue the conversation with them. Another really good question to ask is, can you help me understand why you feel that way, or can you help me understand why you said that? So, time's almost up for me. So I would say this is probably something that everybody knows, which is, when you're explaining this stuff, I don't know about you, but I get really, really excited, and at work, they say, oh man, Mike's about to geek out. Pretty accurate. But I'm probably not the only one here who does that. So I do encourage you, yeah, John's in the back raising his hand. I do encourage you to, probably familiar with the KISS method. The typical way I learned it was keep it simple, stupid. The nicer way is probably keep it simple, silly, okay? But just keep it simple. One of the things, and I gotta give full credit to my wife on this, is share your real life experiences. So that example I gave was actually a good example. Not only could it drive in the rain, but it could drive itself in the rain. And then use analogy when possible. So one example I gave is, well, what about they have a pool? What about their electric pool cleaner? That's cleaning their pool in water, and it's electric. And it was kind of like, oh man, okay, now I get it. The other ones that are some of my favorites, and I'll kind of wrap it up mostly with this, is, well, how can you go that? We take road trips. Now I will say, my dad, he traveled all over the Midwest for his job when I was growing up, and I refer to him as an iron butt, okay? And I grew up riding motorcycles, and there's a rally called the Iron Butt Rally as well. And he can just drive forever. I don't know how he does it. I don't know how his bladder does it, but he does it. But we talk, and I just asked the question, when was the last trip you took? How far did you go? How often do you stop? And I think you'll find in those conversations that you can slip in, okay, well, that's about how often we stop. And we're only stopping to charge for 15 or 20 minutes, and the car's ready before we're done eating, that kind of stuff. So, and because this is a Michigan EV group, although I think it's awesome to see how many people are here from all over the place. We're the land of the big three. I don't know if it's still three, but the big three. I think it behooves us to kind of know a lot about other electric vehicles too. My coworker has a Mach-E. She loves it. She loves our Teslas too, but she's perfectly happy with her Mach-E. And so I encourage her to talk to her about it and learn about it as well. And then it is really, if you have any questions, I'm happy to talk about this anymore, although this is probably the most boring part of your day, right this second. But there's also a lot of people I know here who are really, really good at this. Karl's great at this. I saw Andy, he's one of the volunteers. I saw him when I pulled in. He's so good at this. Kelly's good at this. A lot of these speakers, if not all of them, I'm sure all of them, are really good at having these understanding conversations. So it's really up to us. We just saw a great example of the power of individual people with the vote at the Tesla shareholder meeting, right? That was really driven by retail investors. So this really is no different than that in my eyes. So I would encourage you to do that. And thank you again for everybody here. And I think I turn it over to someone else. And I don't know who that is. So we'll find out.